And them redcoats, they intended that we wouldn't. That was it. It was that simple to Preston and to the vast majority of Americans who were fighting for freedom during the American Revolution. They understood liberty. Liberty. And if you think about it in your own mind, what you're fighting for, whether it's property rights, or you feel like you're overtaxed, or you feel like they're destroying our Constitution, if you really think about it and you try to distill it in your mind and in your heart to what you're fighting for, it really, I think, always comes back to that word, doesn't it? Liberty. That's what we're all fighting for. That's what the men and women and the families who sacrificed everything back then were fighting for, and that's what we're fighting for today. Today we've watched that liberty be eroded pretty dramatically, haven't we? It's little by little, like the proverbial frog in the pot of boiling water, right? They turn up that heat slowly on us. They've been doing it for decades. One by one, they strip away our liberties. They strip away our Second Amendment liberties. They strip away our First Amendment liberties. They strip away our property rights. And I think there's something that we have to be thankful for. It's hard to be thankful, but I think we have to be thankful for the election of Barack Obama, because they turned the heat up real high all of a sudden, didn't they? And a lot of the frogs jumped out in that pot of boiling water and said, I'm not going to be boiled alive. I jumped, right? A lot of us jumped. We felt it turning up during the Bush administration. When George Bush said, I'm abandoning free market principles to save the free market, and literally pounded my forehead on my desk. It's hard to believe that somebody who is an alleged conservative could say something like that. It's hard to believe the President of the United States could say something like that. But then when Barack Obama was elected, he essentially carried on the Bush economic policies, but doubled or tripled or quintupled down on them. And so our liberties are being stripped away one by one. And that's what we're fighting about. There are ways to restore those liberties. It's not just elections. We've got an important primary taking place tonight. In fact, I think results are probably starting to pour in right now. So we're fighting a presidential election. That's one way to fight for your liberties. And from there on down, the Senate, the House, the state houses, your county, your city government. I would argue to you that the power pyramid, the way we pay attention to it, is backwards. Everybody's talking about the presidential election. Every interview I do is about the presidential election. Right before I came on tonight, I got a call from Cavuto's show. Can you come on tonight and talk about the presidential primaries? That's great. It's important who the president is. It's important that we pay attention. Have any of you sat down and had a chat with the president lately? I haven't. I don't know anybody who has. The president doesn't listen very much to the people. Gets elected and then of either party, and frankly kind of ignores the people, is separated from the people. And the further you go down the power structure, your Senate, how many people hang out, here we call them the evil twins in California, but in any state, most of us don't get a chance to talk to our senator. Your representative, maybe, some of us. How many people have met with their representative? So you look around the room, there's some people who've met with their representative. You might have some influence there. Then you get into your state legislature, your assemblyman. Right now we have a chance to really have a conversation and get down to your county or your city. These are your neighbors, your friends, your business associates. You have some real influence there. So I think the power pyramid is how we look at it. We need to reverse it. Your power, where you have the most power and the most influence, is the county, the city, the school board, the water board, the places that affect your community most. When you affect those things, if you take over the city council, if you take over the county, then those things will trickle their way up through the system. Those people that you elect, as long as you keep your eye on them, as long as you make sure they stay true to the ideals, will work their way up through the system. When you fight that fight, you're fighting for generational change. We can win, from my lips to God's ears, the House, the Senate, and the presidency in 2012, right? Do you guys believe we can do that? But even if we do that, history shows us we could lose that again in 4 years, couldn't we? But if you take your city and your county and your state, that's generational change. That will trickle its way up through the system over the next 25 years, and you guys can be sure that you take back your country. Now, there's some structural changes that we can make in the country, too. I get accused of being radical sometimes. You guys want to hear some radical ideas? I like radical. I'm tired of incremental. John Boehner's an incrementalist. I like radical. We need to go for radical change back to our foundation, right? So I've got the books here, and this is my shameless pitch for the books, but I'll tell you some things that are in there about how to really make fundamental change. If you know your history, 1913, I would argue, was one of the worst years in American history. A lot of things happened in 1913. We invented the Fed in 1913, right? That speaks for itself. That's a mess that would take an entire book to write about. There are books about it. In 1913, we passed the Federal Income Tax Amendment, the 16th Amendment. Now, anybody in here like paying federal income taxes? No. But it's not, we're not anti-tax. I mean, people need to pay taxes. You're going to live in a society. You got to support the government. The issue with the federal income tax was that it created a direct financial relationship between the citizen and the federal government. It was not supposed to be that way. The state was supposed to serve as an intermediary because the founders knew that the federal government would always try to usurp power from the states, right? So that was an intermediary step that they couldn't take money directly from you. So we broke that with the 16th Amendment. We can repeal that and restore the balance. So I'd say that's step one, repeal the 16th Amendment. Crazy? Yes. It's doable. I think even more fundamental is the 17th Amendment. Now, the 17th Amendment provided for the direct election of U.S. senators. Now, a lot of people aren't familiar with this. I wasn't before the beginning of the movement. So what happened was the founders understood the federal government would always try to take power, so the states needed representation in Washington, D.C. of people who would go there representing the state as an entity, not the people. People's House is the House of Representatives, but the state itself. They would send the senators, and the senator's primary job was to say one word to the federal government. What do you think that word is? No. No. That was it. The idea, the very idea of an unfunded mandate. Imagine a senator who actually represents the state coming home and saying to the legislature who appointed him, by the way, I've just voted to impose millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars of fees upon our citizens, and we don't get anything for it, and you have no say over it. The legislature would fire that person. And they often did before the 17th Amendment. Now, my friends on the left, when I tell them we should repeal the 17th Amendment, say, Mark, you don't understand your history. 17th Amendment was passed because there was grave corruption in the Senate in the early 1900s. See, now when I'm in an audience with people on the left, they don't usually laugh. They look at me like, what? How's that worked out for us? So we can and should repeal the 17th Amendment. Now, that idea might have been crazy 5 years ago, but I can tell you from traveling all over the country, and I've spoken at Harvard, I've spoken at universities all over the country, that there are law professors talking about this idea now. So it's not outrageous, and I will predict that within 10 years we'll be having a serious discussion in this country about repealing the 17th Amendment. You guys with me? Gotta dream big. Now here's a big one. In 1913, a very bad year, we passed the Reapportionment Act of 1913. Anybody familiar with that one? See, now this is weird. We don't know our history. I didn't know about this until I started doing the research for the book, and I said, keep seeing this year. It's a bad year. Reapportionment Act said that we are going to fix the number of members of the U.S. House of Representatives at 435. 435 to represent the entire country. Now, the founders argued about whether 30,000 to 50,000 was the right amount of people in a particular district. How many people could one human being adequately represent? There was debate about that. So we fixed it at 435. Now, if you repealed that act today, and you said, let's call it 50,000 per district maximum. By the way, average district today, 700,000, and the largest over 900,000. How can any one person represent that many people? They can't. If you repealed it today, there would be 6,220 members of the House of Representatives. Now get my friends on the left say, well, Mark, I mean, imagine that. How would they pass any legislation? It's amazing how smart people on the right are. They always get the folks on the left are like, it just won't work. So let's imagine that. 6,200 representatives. Now, if you've been to Washington, D.C., and you've seen the Capitol building, and you've seen the floor of the House of Representatives, we couldn't possibly fit all 6,200 of them there, could we?
No, they stay home.
So, do they need to be in Washington, D.C.? So in the book, we talk about an idea called the virtual Congress. Now, there is a rule on the House of Representatives on the floor that you have to be on the floor of the House to cast your vote. It's not a law. It's not in the Constitution. In fact, John Boehner could repeal that rule today with a simple majority vote. So we argue that we should drive them home. Send your representatives back to their districts. Now imagine, if you will, a country where there are 6,220 representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives, and they're spread out across 50 states. You might like it, but it's K Street's nightmare, right? What goes on in Washington, D.C. that we can think of when these guys go to D.C. that's good? Is it the parties? Is it the lobbying? Is it the fancy cars? Is it men and women away from their family constantly? Is that what's good? You know, there's something that takes place in Washington, D.C. when these folks go to D.C. And there's something that most people don't realize. You go to D.C. and let's say you're a newly elected congressman. And you go there and you're in the new majority. And this happened to a lot of people I know. You'll get a call from John Boehner's chief of staff or Eric Cantor's chief of staff, and they will tell you, Steve, you're new in Congress. You need to know your way around. I've got a chief of staff that is going to be able to give you everything you need. And he knows his way around, or she knows her way around. They know everybody. They understand all the procedures and the committees. And you say, wow, thanks. That's awesome. Because I don't know my way around and it's overwhelming. And so you hire this person. Now who is that person loyal to? John Boehner, Eric Cantor, or their chief of staff, right? And who controls the flow of information to the congressperson? The chief of staff. Who controls the meetings that you take? Chief of staff. Who often controls the legislation that you read and support? The chief of staff. That's called staff capture. And they're loyal to the speaker or to whoever got them. And you know what? They're human beings. Their career is being a staffer. Ultimately, they may even become a congressperson. They're not loyal to you. You're a junior congressperson. Would they rather work for somebody more powerful? Sure they would. Ultimately, they'd rather be on a committee, and a staffer on a committee. So they're not loyal to you. They may have never even been to your district. They're probably not from your state. But if you drove all these people back home to their home districts, then they would be from your district, from your state, loyal to you, and loyal to your people. Now that's representative government, right? You guys like that? Okay, so these are crazy, radical ideas. The American Revolution was a crazy, radical idea, right? Liberty, if you think about it, at its essence, is a crazy, radical idea. If you study history, and the founders had studied a lot of history, it's something they had in common. They understood this compendium of history. History is a pendulum from a government perspective that swings back and forth between tyranny and really bad tyranny. Right? America's unique. The idea of a nation based on liberty is unique. It's a very unusual thing. It's not the norm. We have to fight to keep it. It didn't just grow out of nothing. It grew, in my opinion, out of providence. Because these men and their families understood liberty. Why did they understand liberty? This is another thing that really I was shocked to learn about history. It's embarrassing to say this in hindsight, but when I think about how I was taught history as a kid, you know, you have the Pilgrims landed Plymouth Rock, we have the Jamestown settlement, and then not long after that is the American Revolution. It's really pretty condensed when you learn about it in school. You don't learn a lot about the time period of the development of the colonies and what they went through. Most people don't realize how long that was. 180 years, roughly, of self-governance. Over 5 generations. It's a long period of time. They'd been left alone to determine their own fate, to determine how to govern themselves. Right? Left alone in the wilderness, the crown across an ocean, there was very little governance that came from afar. So by the time of the American Revolution, men and families like Levi Preston's existed because that's just how it had always been. We had always governed ourselves, and we always meant to govern ourselves. That's our history. It's in the American DNA. It's highly unusual, and you have to fight to protect it. You have to stand, right? We have to stand. Is everybody in here willing to stand and do their part? Are you guys willing to fight for this legacy? So I want to tell you a couple of stories. So one, so that you get some inside perspective on how government views the Tea Party. This is really important. You know, it's my perspective as a Tea Party perspective. And I've had a chance to meet with people that I never thought I would meet with. I don't know if you can see my boots, often I'm wearing my hat. I'm just a cowboy from the country. Nobody special. I wasn't engaged in politics before this movement. I'm not from a moneyed or powerful family. I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy who was willing to stand up. And I ended up in Washington, D.C. I've been there a whole bunch. I try to go as little as possible now because it takes me about a week to shower off the slime when I come home. But I ended up there, and I ended up there a couple of times sitting in John Boehner's office. First time I sat in John Boehner's office, the Tea Party movement, we'd gone past the September big march, and we wanted to meet Boehner. He wanted to meet us. He actually asked us to come in and see him. And we sat down in Boehner's office. I went in, and he was the minority leader at this point. And it's a beautiful office. I mean, if you ever get a chance to go to the U.S. Capitol and to be steeped in that history, it's extraordinary. The ante-room to his office is probably 1,500 square feet. Cherry wood paneling, 25-foot ceilings. It's spectacular. We get let in through multiple layers of security, and we end up just in this little sort of cubby hole outside his office where the receptionist sits, and I hear her call him, and he says, no, I can hear him from in his office. No, well, I'll come out and meet him myself. I'll greet him myself. And Boehner comes out, sleeves rolled up, tie askew, empty coffee cup in one hand, and a cigarette lit in the other hand. Intro, I'm John Boehner, nice to meet you, and he leads us into his office. And he sits in there the whole time we're meeting with him, chain smoking the entire time. I'm struggling to pay attention to what he's saying because I keep picturing in my head all the signs on the way in that said no smoking in the Capitol. And then I realized, wait, that's right. It doesn't apply to them. That's a law. And so, now when you go to a meeting in DC and you meet with a congressman, the crux moment is always the same. Congressman, senator, it doesn't matter, it's always the same. In every meeting, this question is going to come. What can I do for you? They're always going to ask that question. Because this is the nature of DC or Sacramento, it's a favor factory. And the goal that they have, they think you're there to kneel down before the king, right? Your Honor, we're here to request your favor. And they want to do that favor for you. They want to know what they can do for you, because once they do, you're in the little black book, right? We can call on those people when we need them. We'll call on them in the elections. We'll call them in this particular fight. They'll support us. They'll support our ideas. So comes to that moment in the meeting, and John Boehner says, first he spends 20 minutes telling us he's a regular guy, which is always a bad sign. He says, what can we do for you? And the staff is sitting around with their steno pads, with the pens at the ready, and we say, absolutely nothing. And that's the sound you hear. It's very quiet. And all the staff looks up, and everybody looks at each other, and they're all confused, because this is not how the script plays out. And Boehner finally says, well, what are you guys doing here then? And we said, we want you to know we represent millions of people, and we're watching you. We weren't popular. The meeting broke up shortly after that, and that was meeting number one. Meeting number two, John, came right before he was elected. They were elected in the majority. We knew he was going to become speaker. And Tea Partiers across the country sent in their suggestions to us what they thought the Republicans should do in Congress. And the main thing we heard over and over is, We want the Republicans to be bold and visionary. The country is on the precipice. They need to take immediate and drastic action. We're not looking for incrementalism. We're looking for now. Bold, visionary leadership. And people specifically said, and this was a brilliant idea, we would like to see the Republicans enact Bill Clinton's last budget. It would cut roughly $500 billion immediately from the federal budget. And what great politics for the new Republican majority to say, we want to enact Bill Clinton's last budget. So we went there to tell this to John Boehner. We told him, bold, visionary leadership, this is what we're looking for. Great, I want to know what you guys are looking for. I want to know what people really want. And he said, specifically, what do you want? And we told him, $500 billion, Bill Clinton's last budget. And he looked at us, and he took a big draw of his cigarette, and he threw his head back, and he said, ha, 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 ha. Well, that really is bold, isn't it? We didn't laugh. We just looked at him. And I looked at my co-founder, and it was a knowing look, and we just said, okay, we know what we're going to get. Is that what we've gotten? That's what we've gotten, right? So what that means to me is that they're not going to fight for our liberty. The government is structured so that they're not going to fight for our liberty. It's in the nature of government. The founders told us that they would always consolidate power. Jefferson said, the last line of defense against the Constitution is the American people, the American citizenry. We're the ones who have to defend the Constitution. Not just against the Democrats either, right? How many people in this room think we need malpractice reform, medical malpractice reform? You guys are in favor? We need it in this country, right? Desperately. The Republicans in the Senate put up a jobs bill. Now, of course, nothing in the Senate that the Republicans do goes anywhere. Harry Reid stops it, our neighbor, unfortunately. But the Republicans put in that bill medical malpractice reform. Occasionally they do something right? Is that right? Are you sure that's right? Medical malpractice reform at the federal level that tells California and every other state what their maximum judgment can be in their state courts, what attorneys can get. Is that in the Constitution somewhere? The Republicans say it is. What clause do you think that they use to justify that piece of legislation? The Republicans. Rand Paul was one of the sponsors of that bill. Rand Paul. I tell you that not just to chastise the Republicans, though I like doing that, but because I want you to understand they won't defend the Constitution. Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, they will all try to pass legislation that impinges, that destroys our Constitution. If it sounds good, if it feels good at the gut level, if it fits their political philosophy, they'll try to pass the legislation. It's up to us to defend the Constitution. Every single one of us. So when I first heard about that legislation, I didn't know, I didn't understand. You always have to ask yourself the question, though, is that constitutional? Not just, do I like that idea? That's the easy way out. The American citizen way out, the civic way out, is to ask yourself the question, is that constitutional? Then you ask yourself the question whether or not you like it. Now, I believe in malpractice reform. We just need to do it at the state level. It's not the federal government's job. So I point this out to you because you need to understand it's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's not conservative. It's not liberal. It's about America. And I'm gonna say something that at a conservative forum might be a little bit radical, which is it's not liberal versus conservative either. I speak at a lot of liberal groups now. I'll be up next weekend in Seattle at what's called the Guiding Lights Forum. I'm going to choke when I tell you this, but the final keynote speaker is Van Jones. Might be a little dangerous for he and I to be in the building together. I'm going there because the ideas are important. Because we have to be willing to go anywhere to defend this country and to defend our ideas and to defend the Constitution. We have to be willing to go as deeply in the belly of the beast as it takes. I've been to Berkeley, I've been to Harvard, I've talked to the founder of MoveOn.org. I'll go up to Seattle and I'll sit in a room and have dinner with Van Jones, because these ideas are too important to abdicate the battlefield. And on the left, and there are lots of those folks here in this area, right? This is a radical thing to say, but you will find people of good conscience on the left. They will disagree with you on almost every single policy issue in the end. But they will agree with you on something if you frame the discussion the right way. People on the left of good conscience believe that the country has drifted away from the citizen. They believe that the people who are in charge, left and right, no longer represent us. They believe that crony capitalism, and yes, even crony unionism, is destroying the country. And they believe that we need to devolve power away from the federal government, away from the state governments, and drive it as locally as we possibly can. This is a common theme. Left and right, Democrat or Republican, conservative or liberal. The idea that only through the exercise of self-governance will we restore this country to its foundation is not a partisan idea. And I encourage you, go into the belly of the beast, talk to your friends and family, but try not to fight with them. Talk to them about the ideas that we have in common. If you want to put it in the parlance of the left talks about shop local, grow local, buy local, just throw in govern local. Right? Are you guys with me? So I want to close with a story, and then we'll open it for questions. So I get to travel all across the country. It's easy for me. You guys are here and you're fighting, in my opinion, the hard fight on the ground in your own community. For me, it's easy. I travel around the country, and everywhere I go, I meet people like you. You hear the term ordinary American? I haven't met any of those. They're all extraordinary Americans everywhere I go. Really millions of them all across the country. And every night of the week, there are meetings like this taking place in every state in the country. Don't let them tell you that we're declining or going away, because we're not. And every place I meet people that are amazing. There are people who donate money to the movement, people who work, people who stand up and do the hard jobs, people like these guys that organize these events. You need to step up and do something. This is the critical thing, is to step up and actually do something. I was reviewing a donor list. I do this all the time because I want to thank people who donate. Over 250,000 people have given to the Tea Party movement in this country. The Tea Party Patriots, by the way, have a larger donor list than the Heritage Foundation in only 3 years. It's extraordinary. So I go through this list and I'm looking for people who stand out. And a couple of months ago, I saw somebody by the name of Alice, and she lives in Dallas, Texas. And I try to call these folks just to thank them, to let them know their money didn't just go into an abyss, that I appreciated. And this woman had given $1,000, $1,500, $2,500. There was a $5,000 check regularly. It was amazing. So I picked up the phone and I called her, and the phone rang a few times, and there was an answer. Nice southern drawl, I love that. And it was an assisted living facility. And so I was a little bit, kind of like you, oh, wow, I don't know why, but I didn't expect that. It took about 5 minutes to get Alice to the phone. So all kinds of images are going through my mind. I'm picturing in a wheelchair or in a walker or something. And she comes to the phone, she answers the phone, I tell her who I am, and she says, oh, I'm so excited it's you. I saw you on Fox News last night. I can't believe you're calling me. Which still seems weird to me. And I said, no, Alice, you're the hero. You've been giving money, and every month I see these checks, and I just can't believe what you're doing. You're so generous. It's incredible. And I said to her, I'm going to be coming to Dallas soon, and I would love to take you out to lunch or dinner. And she said, oh, Mark, I'm going to be 100 years old on July 4th. You don't want to date me. And I told her, Alice, even if I wanted to date you, my wife would not allow that. But I do want to take you out to dinner. So I did go to Dallas after her birthday on July 4th. And I got the chance to take her and her 73-year-old son out to dinner. Really extraordinary. The woman's so sharp and so engaged, and we had political discourse the whole evening. And her son brought up the presidential election. At this point, all the slate of candidates were still in on the Republican side. And he started asking her, tell Mark what you think of Michelle Bachmann. And she would go through her record and where she's from and her business background. Tell Mark about Tim Pawlenty. And she'd go through. She knew all of them far better than I did. It was just amazing. 100 years old. We're going through this whole discussion, and he gets to Herman Cain. And He says, Mom, tell Mark about what you think about Herman Cain. And she says, who? He says, Herman Cain. Who? He says, Mom, you know, on the Republicans, there's a black guy running for president. And she said, ooh, do you think we're ready for a black man for president? And her son